A piece of trash who can't even manage his desk is fired. While I was on a business trip, the managing director threw away something important to me. No, not just to me. It was important to the company. I understand. He must have understood that. I don't want to be associated with such a person. I decided to accept his offer of resignation. However, the company will face a financial crisis without me. The managing director will be forced to take responsibility and will head down the path of ruin. My name is Kenichi Tanaka, 38 years old. I have been with this company for 11 years. My current title is Technical Director of the Next Generation Energy Project, commonly known as Project Solar. The economic impact of this project is at least 7 trillion yen. It is a major national project that will determine the future of Japan's energy industry. And the success of this project depends on a certain technology I developed. It is a patented battery. The features of this battery are a special coating technology for the liquid leakage prevention film and a unique combination of the battery's performance, which can be stored for more than 10 years without deterioration. It operates stably in any environment. Last week, I flew to Germany for preliminary technical negotiations with Brown Energy, Europe's largest energy company. The person I was negotiating with was a veteran of Brown Energy, Mr. Schneider. From the conference room window of the top floor of the Hansa building in Berlin, I could see the city of Berlin. Mr. Schneider warmly welcomed me. Welcome, Mr. Tanaka. We are very interested in your patented technology. Thank you very much.
We have read your technical paper many times. It's wonderful. With this technology, Europe's energy infrastructure will evolve dramatically. The
negotiations went smoothly. I was able to answer even technical questions with confidence. After 3 days of negotiations, it was time to sign the agreement. At that time, the main Mr. Schneider said with a serious expression, Ms. Tadako.
We trust your patented technology. However, before signing the final contract, let me confirm one thing. What is it? It's an actual inspection of the original prototype of the first prototype battery. Quote.
I was a little surprised. It's to
prove the application for the patented technology. I would like to see the actual product. This is an absolute requirement for us.
I answered immediately. Quote. Of course. I will prepare it as soon as I return to Japan. The main Mr. Schneider nodded in satisfaction. Thank you very much. We want to work with genuine engineers. Engineers who carefully preserve their original work are reliable partners. Those words resonated deeply with me. This first prototype battery was handmade by me in my graduate school lab 13 years ago. It looks old and discolored, and the label is starting to peel off. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a cheap, well-worn electrocution device. But this is the only piece of evidence that proves the physicality of my patented technology. I have kept this battery in a drawer in my desk ever since. For an engineer, the first prototype is special. No matter how old it may look, it is the starting point of one's life as an engineer. After completing the negotiations and returning to Japan, I took a taxi from the airport and headed straight to the company. It was already past 10 p.m., but I was too excited to sleep. I had to put together photos and detailed data of the first prototype battery to send to the Schneider inspectors tomorrow. My heart was pounding as I gazed at the night view from the taxi window. The 7 trillion yen project is just one step away. I arrived at the company and passed through the main gate with the evening paper. I took the elevator up to the 8th floor, where the development department is located. The hallway was quiet. It seemed that no employees were working late into the night. I headed to my desk. When I opened the drawer, there was the first prototype battery. Tomorrow would be another busy day. But it was a happy busyness. I stood in front of my desk and reached into the drawer. The next morning, I arrived at work at 8:30. When I entered the office, all the members of the development department turned to look at me. Welcome back, Tanaka-san. I heard that the European negotiations were a great success. The young Yamada-san came running up to me with big smiles on his face. Hey, thanks to you all, we were able to succeed because of everyone's support. No, it was all thanks to Tanaka-san's skills. I'm really looking forward to signing the contract with the Brannan employees. Seeing their smiles warmed my heart. This team is truly excellent. Both the young and the veterans are working together to support Project Solaris. While I was away on a business trip to Germany, they were making perfect progress in organizing domestic technical data and preparing contract documents. Tanaka-san, tell me your souvenir stories. Then I'll talk to you slowly during lunch break. Yay! I'm looking forward to it. Yamada and Suzuki are acting like children. Their youth and passion are the driving force that keeps the project moving forward. I head to my desk. My desk is piled high with documents that have accumulated during my business trip. But that doesn't matter. The project is going well. We're just one step away from the final contract. The entire team is working towards the same goal. This sense of unity is the greatest support for me. I make coffee and sit down at my desk. I look out the window and see a clear blue sky. The sky is blue and in the distance I can see the silhouette of Mount Fuji. It's a beautiful day. Today is going to be a good day. First, let's continue from last night. I have to take photos of the first prototype battery and send them to the Schneider regulator along with the detailed data. I reach for the desk drawer. At that moment, I feel someone behind me. When I turn around, Sato is standing there. Sato is 55 years old and a veteran who has been with the company for 30 years. He is a capable person who has successfully secured many large contracts, coming from a sales background. He is also my direct supervisor. Welcome back, Tanaka. Good morning, Managing Director. Sato's expression was stiffer than usual. No, it wasn't stiff, it seemed like he was suppressing some emotion. I heard the negotiations in Europe went well. Yes. Thanks to your guidance, Managing Director. I see. Sato-sen gave a short answer and stared at me without saying anything. There was something cold in her gaze. Her eyes weren't smiling. I had a bad feeling. Actually, Sato's attitude had been a little strange recently. It was when President Yoshida evaluated me at the all-vehicle meeting 2 weeks ago. President Yoshida said in the man's room, "Tanaka's patented technology is the key to our future. I am proud to have such an excellent engineer." The venue erupted in loud applause. I felt embarrassed and bowed my head, smiling slightly. At that moment, I didn't miss the obvious clouding of Sato Chimu's expression as he sat in the front row. He didn't even clap, he just stared at me expressionlessly. Since then, Sato has been keeping a subtle distance from me. He has also been increasingly making negative comments about my opinions in meetings. For example, at last week's technical review meeting, when I proposed a new plan to close and improve electric switching stations, Sato Chimu said, "Hey, is that plan really necessary? Isn't the current technology sufficient? I don't think we should spend any extra money." Quote. I explained it carefully. The improvements made by the managing director will extend the life of the electromagnetics by 15%. In the long run, this will lead to cost reductions. I see. Well, if you put it that way, Sato Chimu was just responding with dissatisfaction. In the past, he would have actively supported my proposals. And that cold gaze this morning made me feel uneasy, but I tried not to show it. "By the way, Managing Director, is there something I can help you with?" Sato replied expressionlessly. "Oh, I have something to talk to you about. Yes. Do you have time now?" Quote. "Yes, I'm fine." Quote. Sato Chimu stared at me and said quietly, "Then let's talk in the conference room. Please come to the second conference room on the 3rd floor." "Okay." Quote. With that, Sato Chimu turned and walked away. There was something cold and dismissive about his back. I stopped opening the drawer and stood up. A vague sense of unease spread deep in my chest. Yamada, who was working at the desk opposite, called out to me worriedly. "Are you okay, Tanaka-san?" The executive director looked kind of scary. "I'm fine. I just have a quick report to make." "Really? Please be careful." "Thank you." Quote. I smiled at Yamada and left the office. "Calm down. It's probably just a business report." But the unease in my chest didn't go away. The elevator doors opened and I stepped out into the hallway on the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet. The floor with the conference rooms was still empty at this time of the morning. I walked toward the second conference room. Only my footsteps echoed in the hallway. I stood in front of the conference room. Sato Chimu was waiting on the other side of the door. I hesitated for a moment. But I couldn't run away. I knocked on the door. I went in. I opened the door and went inside. Sato Tsutomu was sitting alone in the conference room. The morning light was streaming in from outside the window. But the air in the room was heavy and cold. Sato was leaning his elbows on the conference room table and staring at me. There was a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Tanaka, sit down." I sat down opposite Sato Tsutomu as I was told. The conference room was completely silent. The sound of cars could be heard outside the window, but only in this room was it as if time had stopped. Sato Kai folded her arms and remained silent for a while, as if she was considering something. Then she slowly opened her mouth. "Tanaka, that dirty electrostatic battery you found on your desk. It was in the way, so I threw it away." At that moment, my thoughts stopped. Time stopped. My heart was pounding. Huh? "So that's why it's the old electrostatic battery you found on your desk." The label was peeling off and it was rusty and discolored. It's clearly trash. I could feel the blood draining from my face. My hands were shaking. "What the heck, Sato?" Continued as if it was nothing. "Leaving such a dirty thing on my desk is a complete lack of hygiene. That's why I asked a cleaning company to dispose of it." Last night, my mind went blank. Last night, just before I returned home, Sato deliberately went through my desk and threw away that battery while I was away. I desperately squeezed out the words. "Sen, your voice is trembling." That was the first prototype electromagnetic battery I developed 13 years ago. Sato-sen didn't move an eyebrow. The first prototype battery. A battery that was so worn out. Sato-sen tilted her head deliberately. You're kidding me, don't you think that kind of trash is important? I'm not kidding. That was the first prototype electromagnetic battery I developed in graduate school 13 years ago. My voice was trembling. It was absolutely necessary for the patent technology application certification for the final contract with Brown Energy. Schneider's director demanded that I check the actual item as an absolute condition. My voice was almost a shout. Sato-sen slowly leaned back in his chair. Then he raised his arm and laughed coldly. Was it something that important? That's too bad. Emmy didn't show the slightest bit of regret. In fact, she even seemed to be enjoying it. Did you know about it and throw it away? Sato-sen shrugged. No, I didn't know. After all, you threw something so important into a desk drawer. Why didn't you just throw it in? Then why didn't you put it in the safe? Sato-sen stood up and approached me. It was an important asset for the company. And why did you leave the evidence, which was the key to the 7 trillion yen project, in a drawer that anyone could open? I was speechless. Answer me, Tanaka. That's for me. That battery is for me, for me, Sato-sen sneered. Tanaka's personal interference has nothing to do with the company. The company's assets should be managed in accordance with the company's rules. That's common sense for working adults. I clenched my fists. It's true that I should have kept it in a safe. But that electromagnet wasn't just evidence to me. I saw it every day when I opened my desk. It reminded me of my roots as an engineer. That battery that I had finally completed after repeated failures in the lab late at night 13 years ago. Every time I saw it, I was reminded of my original intentions. That's why I deliberately left it on my desk. Seeing my silence, Sato Chimu pressed on even further. Tanaka-kun has neglected his responsibilities as the company's important assets and has used important evidence for his own personal gain. This is a clear breach of responsibilities. The executive vice president is different. I'll just listen quietly. Sato Chimu's voice echoed through the conference room. I closed my mouth. Sato Chimu slowly began to walk around me. Like a carnivorous animal stalking its prey. Tanaka-kun had been with the company for 11 years. Yes. I've been with the company for 30 years. 30 years. Sato Chimu, who had devoted himself to this company, stopped behind me. But the president recently said in a pre-meeting where he was only evaluating you that he was proud of you. I felt a chill run down my spine. What I have built up over 30 years, you are trying to surpass in just 11 years. Sato Chimu's voice was filled with clear anger. But Tanaka is a shill. He doesn't know what it means to run a company. I turned around. A cold king dwelled in Sato Chimu's eyes. The company could suffer serious losses due to your lack of management responsibility. If the contract with Brown Energy is broken, who will take responsibility? You? I clenched my fists. My nails dug into my palms. The answer was clear. You will take responsibility. Sato walked to the window and continued while looking at the scenery outside. As of today, Tanaka Hajime is dismissed for introduction. Those words pierce my heart. Long-term dismissal. The reason is a violation of the management responsibility for company assets. This is a matter of discretion as stated in Article 47 of the termination rules. Sato Chimu turned around and smiled coldly. No. Objection. That beat-up battery that the managing director treasured. Who would have thought that such a piece of trash would end your career? How ironic. Seiba, that's a done deal. Your personal belongings will be sent home at a later date. Leave your employee status and get back to work right away. I stood up from my chair. My mind went blank. But in the midst of that confusion, I realized one thing. Sato Tsutomu's eyes. What was in those eyes wasn't anger or disappointment, but satisfaction. A cold, dark satisfaction. I understood everything. This wasn't a matter of management responsibility. It was jealousy over President Yoshida's appreciation of me. For Sato Tsutomu, who had devoted himself to this company for 30 years, it was unbearable for me, who had only been with the company for 11 years, to be highly regarded by the president. That's why he tried to get rid of me. And he used the first main battery as a means to do so. I took a deep breath. Stay calm. Don't let your emotions control you. I looked straight at Sato Tsutomu. Managing Director. I've been keeping all the records for the past 13 years. Sato Tsutomu turned around and saw that all the detailed data of the manufacturing process, 3D scans, and microscope images were perfectly recorded. Sato-sen's expression changed slightly. With that, the situation could definitely be turned around. My voice was not shaking. As an engineer, I have always kept records. All my lab notes, data files, photos, and videos are backed up in the cloud and on an external hard drive. Even if the original prototype battery is lost, I still have a weapon. Sato-sen sneered. You are no longer part of this company. Sato-sen opened the door to the conference room. Get out. Now. I stood up quietly without saying anything. I placed the employee's license on the table. The employee's license I had worn around my neck every day for the past 11 years. It now looked like just a plastic plate. I left the conference room. I walked down the hallway. I got on the elevator. I went back to the 8th floor. When I entered the office, Yamada and Suzuki looked at me with surprised expressions. Tanaka-san, what's wrong? Your complexion. I didn't say anything. I went back to my desk and gathered my personal belongings. Photos, mug, laptop. That was all. What happened, Tanaka-san? A lot of things happened. I tried to smile at the two of them, but I couldn't. Yamada and Suzuki stared at me, speechless. I left the office carrying the cardboard box. I took the elevator down to the 1st floor. I passed through the front gate. The security guard looked at me curiously. As I stepped outside, the cold morning air caressed my chest. The sky was still blue. But my heart was pitch black. I looked back at the company building. The building where I had worked for 11 years. My skills had developed in this building. And now I had been kicked out of this building. I started walking towards the station carrying the cardboard box. The next day, at 9 a.m., the company's most recent executive meeting was taking place in the executive meeting room. The supervisors and executive officers were seated around a long, circular table. Each seat on the table had a file of documents and a bottle of mineral water. The atmosphere in the meeting room was tense, more than usual. Outside the window, I could see the skyscrapers of Tokyo. The sky was clear, but gloom seemed to be hanging over the conference room. Shimodera was discussing the future of Project Solaris. President Yoshida was sitting at the head of the table. President Yoshida was 62 years old. He had been the CEO of this company for 20 years. He was known for his gentle personality, but he was praised for his calmness and accuracy when making important decisions. And sitting next to him was Sato. Sato's expression was more tense than usual. It was as if he was holding some kind of cloud. Sitting across the table from him were General Manager Yamamoto, who was in charge of finances, Sales Manager Hayashi, and Director Inoue, who was in charge of home affairs. They all looked tense. President Yoshida looked at his watch and opened his mouth. Now, Sato, let's begin the meeting. Sato stood up and picked up the remote control. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Today, I have an important report to make regarding Project Solaris. Sato Chinu pressed a button on the remote control. The projector's light appeared on the screen. It's unfortunate that Tanaka-kun is not here, but I have already prepared a rough plan. The conference room was filled with people. In Tanaka's absence, the executives looked at each other. Yamamoto Jinmu whispered to Hayashi Munashige next door. Tanaka-kun, what's wrong? I don't know. You're not listening. The logo of Swiss company Edixon Battery was displayed on the screen. Take a look here. Swiss company Edixon Battery is the world's third largest battery manufacturer. The next slide displays the latest battery catalog. And this is the company's latest related e-Power Cell 5000 series. Sato Sen continued his presentation with confidence. The performance of this product is 20% better than Tanaka-kun's patented battery. Moreover, the cost can be reduced by 30%. A detailed specification table was displayed on the screen, with green check marks for all items such as energy density, high current characteristics, and temperature control. The energy density is 450 Wh per cc, while Tanaka-kun's patented battery is 375 Wh, so this is about a 20% improvement. Sato pointed at the screen with a laser pointer. The flash current characteristics are also excellent. It provides stable performance from -40 degrees to +85 degrees. Yamamoto Jinmu nodded as he looked over the materials. Moreover, mass production systems were already in place, so there was no need to worry about delivery dates. Delivery was possible within 3 months of ordering. Sato Sen looked around the conference room. In other words, Project Solaris could proceed without any problems even without Tanaka's patented battery. Yamamoto Jinmu, one of the executives in charge of finance, raised his hand.
Sato Sen said that it was attractive that the selection cost could be reduced by 30%. Managing
Director Sato switched to the next slide for specific figures. A detailed cost comparison table was displayed there. Yes. If Tanaka's patented battery were used, procurement would be approximately 15 billion yen per year. This amount includes domestic manufacturing costs. Sato Tsutomu pointed to another column in the table. However, if Ericsson's product were used, It would only cost approximately 10 billion yen. Even including transportation costs from Switzerland, this is the price. I see. Cost reduction of 5 billion yen per year. 25 billion yen over 5 years. That's a big deal. Sato Tsutomu nodded in satisfaction. That's right. Eric's products are the best in terms of both technology and cost. Sales representative Hayashi Miu said.
Certainly, if you look at the specs alone, they are perfect. Ericsson is a reliable manufacturer.
Thank you very much. I have already contacted Ericsson's Japanese subsidiary and are in the process of negotiating. Director Inoue asked, have you cleared the intellectual property rights issue? Yes. Ericsson's products are developed using proprietary patented technology. They have nothing to do with Tanaka's patent. A positive atmosphere began to flow in the conference room. The executives were intently reading the documents. Sato Chimu was secretly disappointed. With this, Tanaka is no longer needed. I will make this project a success. But at that moment, President Yoshida spoke quietly. Sato Chimu, I have one question. Sato Chimu looked at President Yoshida. President Yoshida's expression was calm. But there was a sharp light in his eyes. Where is Tanaka? The atmosphere in the room changed completely at that question. The executives all looked up at once. Sato Chimu was momentarily at a loss for words. Let me ask him too.
Explain why Tanaka, the technical director of Project Solaris, is not attending this important meeting.
Sato Chimu cleared his throat. Everyone in the conference room stared at Sato Chimu. He was dismissed yesterday for breach of management responsibilities. The conference room froze. Yamamoto Jimyu exclaimed involuntarily. Chokai Hayashimu looked surprised. Tanaka was dismissed. President Yoshida's expression suddenly became stern. What? Tanaka had left the first prototype battery, an important asset of the company, in his desk drawer. This was a clear breach of management responsibilities. President Yoshida stood up slowly. The executives gasped at his movement. What did Sato Chimu just say?
So it's not a breach of management responsibilities.
President Yoshida's voice echoed through the conference room. The executives all stiffened at once. No one had ever seen President Yoshida raise his voice this much. He unilaterally dismissed the technical director of Project Solaris without consulting me. Sato Chimu walked over a step later.
This is a serious act of human error. Sato Chimu.
President Yoshida's anger was fierce. It was the first time even the executives had seen the usually mild-mannered President Yoshida so furious. President, please wait. Did I
fire the central figure of a 7 trillion yen project for the sake of the company, for the sake of the company, for the sake of the company?
Sato Chimu desperately protested. President, technology should be evaluated by the product, not the person. Sato Chimu pointed to the screen. There is no problem as long as we have Eric's product. It is superior to Tanaka's patented battery in both performance and cost. The numbers prove it. President Yoshida glared at Senior Managing Director Sato.
Technology is the person. It is not a product catalog.
But President, look at this spec sheet. It is obvious. Do you seriously think this project will succeed without Tanaka? Sato Chimu was speechless at President Yoshida's words.
Tanaka is the developer of the patented battery. He understands the essence of the technology more deeply than anyone. President Yoshida looked around the conference room. Do you think you can understand technology just by looking at the specs written in the product catalog? Technology is packed with the knowledge and experience of developers that cannot be expressed in numbers.
President, but what
Brown Energy is looking for is not a product. It's Tanaka's technology itself. You don't understand that. Sato Chibe's face fell. Without Tanaka, who would deal with technical problems when they arise? Are you going to leave it all to Eric? Do you think that will maintain the credibility of the 7 trillion yen project? That's because the
members of the technical department were working under Tanaka's instructions. Without Tanaka, the team wouldn't function. A heavy atmosphere hung in the air in the conference room. None of the executives said a word. A conflict between President Yoshida and Sato Tsutomu. An irreparable rift was about to form between these two. Hayashibe timidly opened his mouth. President. But Tanaka's dismissal had already been carried out. It's time to withdraw now. It's
time to withdraw now. However,
withdrawing the long-term employment contract would affect the company's credibility. From a management perspective too. President Yoshida's determination to withdraw it was unwavering.
Sato Chimu's dismissal by a group of individuals is the other way around. Naka-kun is an essential employee for this company, Sato Chimu said in a trembling voice.
President, are you denying my 30-year career? President Yoshida looked straight at Sato Tsutomu. Sato-kun was an excellent sales manager. I admit that. The many contracts you have secured are an asset to this company. Sato's expression softened slightly. However, President Yoshida's next words shattered that.
But you don't understand technology. And above all,
President Yoshida took a step closer to Sato Chimu.
You apologized for your judgment out of jealousy of Tanaka-kun.
Sato Chimu's face turned bright red. Jealousy, but not jealousy? Sato Chimu was speechless. The conference room was enveloped in silence. The atmosphere that enveloped the conference room was as if time had stopped. President Yoshida and Sato Tsutomu stared at each other. The executives could only sit there in an atmosphere where it was hard to breathe. Yamamoto General was clasping his hands on the table. Sweat was seeping into his palms. Hayashi Miu was staring at the documents, unable to move a muscle. Inoue, the supervisor, had taken off his glasses and was pressing his forehead against them. The air in the conference room was heavy and cold, like lead. At that moment, the red telephone in the corner of the conference room rang loudly. The sound seemed to cut through the silence. The executives all turned their attention to the telephone. That red telephone was President Yoshida's exclusive hotline for the most important matters. It was not used for regular business communications. This telephone only rang a few times a year, and even then, only for serious matters that could affect the survival of the company. It was an emergency call from a major business partner, an important notice from a government agency, or a call to inform them of the worst-case scenario. Yamamoto Miu's face turned even paler. Hayashi Miu involuntarily gasped. President Yoshida's expression changed in an instant. There was a clear look of anxiety in his eyes. President Yoshida took his eyes off Sato and walked towards the red phone. One step, then another. His steps were somehow heavy. The conference room became even quieter, and the executives watched, gulping. President Yoshida stopped in front of the phone for a moment. Then, as if his stomach had disappeared, he accepted the call. It's Yoshida. The interpreter's voice could be heard from the other side of the room. The voice was low, calm, and cold. President Yoshida, this is Schneider from Brown Energy. President Yoshida's face turned pale in an instant. The executives did not miss the change. Schneider, the supervisor, is the last person you should contact right now. He's a good supervisor. Thank you for contacting us. President Yoshida spoke calmly. However, a thin layer of sweat was forming on his forehead. This is a direct message to President Yoshida. The interpreter's voice was mechanical and cold. It was like a judge reading a verdict. We have received information that reporter Tanaka Hajime has been fired and that the original prototype batteries have been discarded. President Yoshida's eyes widened. His heart pounded. How could the Schneider director know about this? Tanaka's daughter hadn't even been alive 24 hours ago. How could information leak overseas so quickly? Where did it come from? I can't tell you the information. But our information is accurate. We always keep an eye on important business partners. President Yoshida tightened his grip on the phone. Is it
true that Tanaka was hired as an intermediary?
President Yoshida answered after a moment's hesitation. I can't lie. Schneider directors already know the truth.
Yes, it is true. However, this is an apology for our internal procedures and we will retract it immediately. Is it also
true that the original prototype batteries were discarded?
Yes.
President Yoshida's voice trembled slightly. I see. On the other end of the phone, Schneider director sighed deeply. The sound echoed through the conference room through the telephone. President Yoshida, we trusted the reporter. The voice of the Schneider director was tinged with disappointment. We trusted Mr. Tanaka's technology and his integrity, and were about to sign a contract worth 7 trillion yen. We, the main directors, were. However, since the original prototype battery had been discarded, it is impossible to prove the patent technology. The main director's voice was cold and final. It was as if he was telling us that everything was over. We cannot invest 7 trillion yen in technology that cannot be proven. This is the decision of our board of directors. President Yoshida desperately searched for words.
Main Director Tanaka has a perfect record. Videos, data, and microscope images of the manufacturing process are all
insufficient as records. The main director cut off President Yoshida's words. What we demanded was confirmation of the original work in person. That was an absolute condition of the contract. President Yoshida, this was something that was clearly agreed upon during the preliminary negotiations. President Yoshida was speechless. That was exactly right. From the very beginning, the Schneider director had made confirmation of the actual work an absolute condition. Therefore, Brown Energy cannot continue the technical contract with the reporter. Please wait. President Yoshida's voice echoed in the conference room. The executives began to understand the seriousness of the situation from President Yoshida's desperate expression. Yamamoto Jinmu covered his face with both hands. Hayashi Jinmu bit his lip. If the situation did not improve by 6 p.m. Central Europe time today, Director Schneider would continue overnight. The interval felt like an eternity. We will demand the full return of the 150 billion yen advance payment that has already been paid, as well as damages for the breach of contract. 150 billion yen, with all the blood draining from President Yoshida's face. And damages. This company's annual operating profit is approximately 80 billion yen. The return of just 150 billion yen would cause devastating damage to the company's finances. If damages are added, it will be bankruptcy.
Director Schneider, please give us a little more time.
6 p.m. Central Europe time. That's 1 a.m. tonight in Japan time. That is our final deadline. President Yoshida, we trusted the reporter. That's why this result is so disappointing. Goodbye. The chief supervisors. Phone was disconnected. Only the harsh dial tone echoed in the conference room. President Yoshida was still holding the receiver, unable to move. His back looked as if it had been 10 years since he had left it. His shoulders were slumped, and his back was hunched. None of the executives in the conference room could speak. After a while, President Yoshida slowly put down the sling. The sound echoed loudly in the night. Then he turned around. His face was a mixture of anger and despair. His eyes were bloodshot, and a deep scar was etched on his forehead. President Yoshida glared at Sato Kai. Sato Kai. His voice was low and frighteningly quiet. On the contrary, his solemnity amplified the fear.
That battery you discarded was the key to the 7 trillion yen contract.
Sato Kai, sitting clinging to his chair, his face pale and his lips trembling. Sweat was pouring down his body. You threw it away based on your own emotions alone. President Yoshida approached Sato Chimu one step at a time. Each step made Sato Chimu's heart tighten. Brown Energy demanded the return of the 150 billion yen advance payment and compensation for damages in order to terminate the contract. The deadline was 1 a.m. tonight. The executives held their breath. Yamamoto Jinmu couldn't help but offer his support. 150 billion yen. That amount of money is beyond our cash reserves. Hayashi Senmu also said with a pale face, if compensation is added, the company will not be able to handle it. Director Inoue said in a trembling voice, it's my father. Without a doubt, the conference room was on the verge of panic. The executives looked at each other, their faces filled with despair. But President Yoshida was only looking at Sato Chimu.
Sato Chimu's personal jealousy was trying to force this company into a father's business. Sato
Chimu couldn't say anything. He just trembled. He had both hands on the table, but they were shaking slightly.
Jealousy towards Tanaka. With that alone, you have exposed the future of the company and the lives of 5,000 employees to all that experience. Every
word President Yoshida said pierced Sato Chimu's heart. Yamamoto Jinmu looked at Sato Chimu. There was a clear look of disapproval in his eyes. Sato Chimu, what are you doing? The lives of 5,000 employees and their families, tens of thousands of people, are at stake. Hayashi Senmu also stared coldly at Sato Chimu. Your 30-year career is over now. No, not only is it over, you're taking the whole company with you. Supervisor Inoue said nothing. He just looked at Sato Sumu with disappointed eyes. That silence was the heaviest of all. Sato Sumu was being looked at with disapproval by everyone in the conference room. He had worked for this company for 30 years. He had successfully secured numerous large contracts and contributed to the company's growth. But now all of that was meaningless. A single emotion had destroyed everything. Sato Chimu almost collapsed from his chair. Everything went dark in front of his eyes. He had difficulty breathing. The clock in the conference room ticked away. 9:45 a.m., 6 p.m. European time, 15 hours and 15 minutes until 1 a.m. Japan time. President Yoshida took a deep breath and looked around the conference room.
Now we need to think about how to overcome this crisis. Calm down, everyone.
But behind his words, President Yoshida's own expression was etched with deep despair. President Yoshida called out to the conference room door. The door opened and his secretary rushed in. Yes, President.
Call Tanaka back immediately. Call him on his cell phone and have him come to the office immediately. I'm sorry. Sato Sen's arbitrary decision to hire him is over there. Tell him that.
Yes. Right away. The secretary rushed out of the conference room. President Yoshida sat back down in his chair. A look of deep fatigue appeared on his face. He covered his face with both hands and let out a deep sigh. An oppressive silence fell over the conference room. The hands of the clock ticked away. 10 a.m. None of the executives spoke. Crew member Yamamoto repeatedly looks over the documents in his hand. But his eyes do not follow the words. Forestry officer stares blankly out the window. Supervisor Inoue takes off his glasses and closes his eyes. Time just passes. Sato Sen remains seated in his chair. He looks like a prisoner awaiting execution. His hands are placed on his knees, trembling slightly. Sun and sweat continue to drip from his forehead. At 10:30 a.m., there is a knock on the conference room door. Knock. The executives all look up at once at the sound. The entrance door opens, and the secretary pops her head out. President Tanaka has arrived. A glimmer of hope appears on President Yoshida's face. Let him in.
Immediately.
Yes. A few seconds later, the door opens again. And I enter the conference room. He is wearing a suit, but his tie is slightly loose. But there is a certain light of determination in his eyes. I step into the conference room. President Yoshida, Jinmu Yamamoto, Chibe Hayashi, Director Inoue, and Chibe Sato were all looking at me. The atmosphere in the conference room was completely different from yesterday. Something painful and urgent had happened. President Yoshida stood up slowly. Then he bowed deeply. Tanaka-kun, I'm so sorry. Following him, Jinmu Yamamoto, Chibe Hayashi, and Director Inoue also stood up and bowed deeply. Tanaka-san, I'm so sorry. We underestimated your worth. Please forgive us. I watched the scene silently. Yesterday, I left the building carrying a cardboard box after being kicked out of this company. I haven't forgotten that humiliation. But now all the management was bowing their heads. President Yoshida looked up. There was a desperate plea in his eyes. Tanaka-kun, I'll explain the situation, but before that, let me say this. Please save the company. I nodded quietly. Okay. President Yoshida explained the contents of the phone call from the Brown Energy person. The contract was worth 150 billion yen, and compensation for damages. And the reduction was due at 1 a.m. I heard everything. The situation was dire. But I had one certainty. We would definitely overcome this crisis. And then I saw Eric's catalog on the table in the conference room. I picked up the catalog. Sato raised his head slightly. There was fear in his eyes. I slowly flipped through the catalog. The cover, product introduction, spec sheet, and technology page. I examined the pages carefully. I looked at the energy density, electrical characteristics, and temperature resistance figures. And my eyes stopped on a small scale at the end of the page. The moment I saw that scale, I understood everything. I raised my head and stared at Sato. Mr. Sato, have you thoroughly researched this Eric product? Sato raised his head anxiously. His face became even paler. What do you want to say? I continued with the Cold War. Look at the scale in this catalog. I opened the catalog and placed it in the center of the table. The executives all peered into the catalog at once. It is written here in small letters. I pointed at that part. This product was developed based on the Japanese Tanaka patent number, JP201256. The conference room was abuzz. Tanaka patent, Mr. Tanaka's patent, Sato's face suddenly went blank. No way. I continued. This JP20123456 is a patent I filed 11 years ago. In other words, the Eric product that the executive vice president chose as a replacement was made based on my patented technology. The president, shocked by the conference room, picked up the catalog and checked it. It's true. Tanaka's patent number is definitely listed. Yamamoto Jimyu's eyes were wide open too. What's going on here? Sato Jimyu tried to stand up from his chair, but he couldn't muster the strength and went back to sitting. No, it's a coincidence. It's definitely a coincidence. I opened the technical data page of the catalog. It's not a coincidence. Take a look at this technology further. I pointed to each item of data. Liquid leakage cap membrane coating pressure 0.8 microns electrode pH value 7.2 internal structure design triple structure electrode material lithium cobalt oxide. I opened my laptop. The screen displays the design data for the first prototype electromagnetic battery from 13 years ago. This is the design data for the first prototype battery I developed 13 years ago. I put the screen and the catalog side by side. Coating 0.8 microns pH value 7.2 internal structure 3-layer structure electrode material lithium cobalt oxide everything matches perfectly. The executives looked back and forth between the screen and the catalog. It's true. The numbers match perfectly. This can't be proven in vain. Sato Chimu desperately tried to refute it. But similar technologies exist all over the world. It just happens that the numbers are close. I stared at Sato Chimu calmly. So is this matching of the composition ratio also a coincidence? I displayed other data on the screen. Developer composition lithium 38%. Ethylene carbonate 42%, dimethyl carbonate 20%. Please look at page 15 of the Elixir catalog. Hayashi Senmu. Flip through the catalog. It's true. The exact same composition ratio is listed. Also look at the temperature characteristic curve. I displayed the graph. The shape of the graph of the electrical characteristics at -40 degrees and the stability at +85 degrees perfectly matches my data. Yamamoto Jinmu said with a look of astonishment. I have exactly the same technology. I looked straight at Sato. Senator Senmu, you tried to eliminate me out of jealousy. But the product you chose as a replacement was none other than my technology itself. Sato Senmu's face completely lost all blood. His lips trembled and he couldn't speak. He supported himself with both hands on the table. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. President Yoshida glared at Sato Senmu.
Sato Senmu, did you neglect even basic technical research and not even read the catalog?
Sato Senmu tried to make excuses in a trembling voice. That's because I come from a sales background and don't have time to read every detail of the catalog for technical details. I cut off Sato's words. I don't have time. Managing Director, you had time to rummage through my desk and throw away the first major electromagnetic, didn't you? Sato was at a loss for words. And there was time to research this edict product and create presentation materials. But there was no time to read the catalog. There was no time to examine the technology. I said quietly but firmly. That's why you should have listened to my opinion as the technical director. You were ruled by your emotions and disregarded the technology. This is the result. Sato Sen couldn't say anything. He just sat there clinging to his chair. President Yoshida stood up. Sato's actions caused the company to lose 150 billion yen and the collapse of a 7 trillion yen project. President Yoshida's voice was trembling with anger. This was not just a treason against the culprit, but tantamount to a betrayal of the company. I connected my laptop to the projector. Data was displayed on the screen. Everyone, the actual first prototype electromagnetic has been lost, but I have kept perfect records of everything for the past 13 years. A video of the manufacturing process in the laboratory 13 years ago began to play on the screen. My younger self is assembling the electromagnetic with a clear conscience. This is a video of the manufacturing process, carefully recording each step. The date and time stamps are also recorded. 8:32 p.m., March 15, 2012. Switching to the next slide. The composition ratio of the developing solution, 38% lithium, 62% aerobic medium, 22 degrees Celsius temperature control, 45% humidity. All conditions are recorded. Moving on to the next slide. Cross-sectional microscope image of the coating film, magnification 5000x. The thickness of the film and all boundaries of the structural layers can be confirmed. And 3D scan data. Internal structure data from 3D scanning. This allows the structure of the first prototype electromagnetic to be perfectly reproduced to the nearest 0.1 millimeters. The executives stare at the screen with expressions of astonishment. Such a perfect record. With this, we can prove the application even without the actual object. I point to the screen. With this digital record, it is possible to prove the application for the patent technology that Brown Energy is seeking. I look at President Yoshida. With this, we can keep the contract even without the actual first prototype electromagnetic. Tears well up in President Yoshida's eyes. Tanaka-kun founded the company. President Yoshida bowed deeply. I look at the sales department again. Sato Chimu is completely overwhelmed. His face was pale and his eyes were empty. Managing Director, you called it a dirty electric shock, but that was the starting point of my life as an engineer. Sato Chimu couldn't look up. For an engineer, the starting point is something that has a measurable value, no matter how old it may seem. I can't entrust the future of this company to you, who can't understand that? President Yoshida declared with a stern expression. Sato Chimu put the 7 trillion yen project in jeopardy due to personal jealousy and brought the company to the brink of bankruptcy. He took responsibility for this and ordered him to take his own job. Sato Chimu collapsed into his chair. His 30-year career and everything were lost in an instant. Tears were streaming down Sato Chimu's eyes. But no one else was there to share those tears. President Yoshida turned to me. Tanaka, I appoint you as the Executive Officer, CTO, Chief Technology Officer. There were cries of surprise in the conference room. I
would like to entrust the technology and future of this company to you.
Thank you. I looked around at everyone in the conference room. I will make the history of the origin of technology and perfect record keeping the culture of this company. I closed my laptop. And now I will send this digital record to Brown Energy. I will definitely keep the contract. I left the conference room and headed to my office. That night, I sent the perfect digital record to Brown Energy's car. The next morning I received a call from the supervisor. Mr. Tanaka, I agree with the perfection of this record. I will continue the contract. 3 months later, the final contract with Brown Energy was successfully concluded. The company was completely out of business, and the stock price reached a new high. After Tsutomu Sato left his job, bad rumors spread within the church, and he was unable to find a final job. As CTO, I established the importance of valuing the origin of technology and keeping all records as pillars of the corporate culture for all employees. My patented technology was highly regarded around the world, and my name was etched in history as a pioneer in the next-generation energy field. One day, I spoke to young engineers in the new laboratory. Be sure to keep records of your work. That will save my future self and the company. The young people nodded with serious expressions. I looked out the window. The blue sky spread out before me. The future is bright.